What's up, everyone? I'm having some technical difficulties over here, so I think everything is fixed right now. But if anyone's in the chat, let me know if everything is working as intended. I'm not sure what's going on. YouTube was complaining about bitrate, then it wasn't showing any people watching or waiting. Now it's saying the bitrate is excellent again. Okay, perfect. Let me check one more thing. I don't know, maybe Starlink was definitely tripping up. I don't know. It's weird. I'm trying to stream to two places at once, and apparently whenever I try to stream to the second place, everything just comes out. Yeah, well, I'm just gonna start this off because I think this stream started a few times now, and now it should be steady. Let's jump in. So today I think there's a lot of people have been talking about Saylor and how stretch and strategy and everything is kind of on the verge of pulling another Luna. A lot of people on crypto Twitter are very, very loud about, this death spiral. So we should talk about it. I think people are really, getting ahead of themselves. And the other thing that's interesting is that the market started pricing in rate hikes instead of rate cuts. I'm gonna just quickly close the window here. And yeah, I don't know. Like, that could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing. Kevin Warsh came onto the committee, and that made things, quite hawkish. I think that's one thing. And then the other thing that we could say is that, if we're expecting zero rate cuts, if that comes back into the expectations, that's probably very bullish, because if we're expecting rate hikes now and we're actually not very bearish, if rate cuts are back on the table at some point in the future, that's probably bullish, right? So, and the other thing that I want to talk about is SpaceX stopping the market. A lot of people think that the IPOs of AI are going to top the market. We talked about this in the first video of the restarted series. And I do think that the AI companies, their IPOs are going to, mark the top. But we have SpaceX, and then we have Anthropic and OpenAI still coming. So there's probably a little bit of room on that side. I really hope the bitrate is going to hold up here, because I get a new warning that it's low, and that the connection is really bad. I'll have to ask Elon if he's rugging me, because obviously, yeah, that's not great. So let's go to the charts. First of all, KuCoin is sponsoring this content, and they are doing this campaign, this event, where you can join using the link in the description below, and you can get up to 10k in rewards. I think if you complete your KYC and do a deposit, you can get up to 4k, depending on how much you deposit. You get $100 for your first $100 deposit, but you get a lot more if you deposit a lot more, and you probably have to do some volumes. There's a bunch of other things, terms and conditions. You can read that. So big shout out to KuCoin. Thanks to them for Sponsoring. So let's start with um, the rate expectations. Basically, it seems to be almost a guarantee. There's only a 9% chance that by the beginning of next year, we're not going to see at least a rate hike. Sorry. If that changes, that obviously gives us a lot more headspace in the market to fuel some more upside on equities. I do think that the target for that is still 8,200 by end of October, and if we go further ahead in the curve, we still see there's a chance that we stay in the same kind of range that we are now, but it's quite low. So for sure, one or two rate hikes are on the table right now, and it's probably related to the whole Iran oil thing, which has calmed down. If we look at the chart, let's go to TradingView. Let's look at oil. Oil has become much cheaper, as you can see, but the downstream effects of this have not gone. So essentially, a lot of countries, supported the oil price through their reserves, and but a lot of oil wasn't actually exported, and that creates all these downstream problems with derivatives of oil. Like you need to refine the oil into diesel, into gasoline. You need to make fertilizer, all that kind of stuff, which is mostly done with gas. But you have to do all these things, and those things will eventually kind of push prices higher in terms of inflation on food and other kinds of services. So there's probably going to be some lag in terms of that, which is possibly why Kevin Warsh is kind of hawkish to start off with, to not, give the market too much of an expectation. And to be honest, like if you look at the S&P 500, it's so sky high right now, right? Um, it's probably going to go much higher, but there's no reason to kind of support it right now. So it's better that he came out of the gates being a little bit hawkish, which gives him the tools to become dovish and support the market just by talking. If there is any kind of pullback that worries the big Manhattan Project, I always say, it's the big Manhattan Project, or the equivalent of with AI, because AI is leading us to echo. Fuck. Is there an echo? Fucking hell. Why is my whole system fucking me today? It's kind of strange because okay, no echo. All right, because that would be a pain in the ass. I don't know. It's like this one thing with Starlink not working properly, and then all of a sudden there's a bunch of other technical issues. Very sorry for that. So back to the yes, there's good reason for Kevin Warsh to you have to turn on your volume, man. It's I already put up the gain. Um, we fixed that last time. So I think when it comes to rate hikes, it's definitely signaling that there is some kind of fear that we're gonna have some lag on the whole energy inflation system, and then we're gonna see that I think once the market starts to pull back, he's gonna sound dovish, right? So we have that kind of as a weapon in the back of our pocket to support the broader global market. And then probably as we head into October, which is when I think we're going to see the first unlocks on the SpaceX IPO, we probably should start to see like a bigger pullback. But at that point in time, we still haven't seen OpenAI and Anthropic, because they're expected to, start of next year, maybe even a little bit later. So I do think the broader picture there is that once we see that pullback, Kevin Warsh is gonna start sound more dovish, He's going to say, oh, inflation is not so bad. Or, we've had the worst of it, blah, 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 blah. And whenever the market then comes into, well, I've been saying 8,200. Let's say it's 8,200. We definitely never know exactly. And it's going to pull back, for example, into 7,100 or something like that below the level here, maybe even to 6,900. They're going to deploy that as a weapon and say, we're expecting no rate hikes. We're not going to do rate hikes, and that should support the market. Maybe they're going to do some rate cuts by then, and that should, support the market into a 2027 rally, in which we're going to see the results of the OpenAI and Anthropic IPOs. So that's rate hikes. And I think then we should just go to the Saylor story, because Stretch. Let's first start with everyone saying that Stretch depegged, which is the first kind of flaw in what everyone's saying. Stretch is designed to be at 100, and the whole purpose of it at being 100 is that once it is at 100, he's going to issue Stretch, and he's going to get money from the market, and he's going to use that to buy Bitcoin, right? But there's zero obligation for him to support it back to 100. There's zero obligation as it goes to, I don't know, it could go to 50. There's zero obligation for him to sell Bitcoin just because it goes to 50. All he needs to do is keep his treasury big enough to be able to pay for the dividends for whoever, for the entire supply of Stretch, which I think currently has a runway just simply taken in dollar reserves they have of about like 8 or 9 months, because he just raised another 300 million to add to that reserve. It's like 1.4 billion at the moment. And all this is saying is that people are scared. People probably got over leveraged on this product, and everyone else is not willing to buy it at 100. And once you buy it at, for example, $88, the effective yield just goes up. So the market is saying, okay, well, I'm willing to take this risk buying Stretch. I'm willing to take the dividend, but the dividend needs to be higher than 11%, which is what you get at 100. At 88, the effective yield sits somewhere around 13%. If you assume it's going to stay at $88 for the rest of the year. If it goes back to 100, actually, you get, 11% straight away, or a little bit more than that, actually. And on top of that, you get the dividends. But the market's just simply saying, I'm not going to pay $100 for 11% of yield. I'm going to pay $88 for that 11% yield on 100. So there's no mechanism that forces Saylor to sell anything except if he runs out of money, which, at that point, I do get the comparison with Luna. But Luna was backed by, USD, US Terra was backed by Luna and the other way around. So it was, let's say that, Bitcoin is not controlled by Saylor. He owns a lot of it, but even if he needs to sell some of his Bitcoin, it's not going to be a giant supply shock. But when Luna was attacked, essentially you could dump a few hundred million of US Terra into a thin liquidity, open a Luna short. People would start to redeem USD for Luna. And as the price went lower, the amount of Luna that would be minted by burning USD would become exponentially higher. So at the end, you had billions of Luna hitting the market, and then it went, to zero, basically. That was programmatically designed, algorithmically designed to happen, and it was enforced instantly by the market. Saylor doesn't have this, if you dump Stretch, you attack Stretch to $50 tomorrow, Saylor is going to do jack shit. He's just going to pay the dividend, and he's going to try and raise some more cash to make sure he has the runway and to restore kind of the faith of the market to actually support Stretch itself, and hopefully everything works out. There is, it's not a zero risk asset, absolutely not, but everyone comparing it to how he's going to blow up and he will have to like sell a shit ton of Bitcoin really quickly, which is then going to start this death spiral because it's programmed to do it. That's just not true, right? There's no peg, and worst case scenario, he's just not going to pay the dividend. Stretch is going to go to zero. People took a risk, but he doesn't have to sell Bitcoin to actually keep Stretch alive. If that happens, Stretch dies, and he's never going to be able to kind of restart it. So I don't think that's what he's going to do. But there's nobody who can force him to do any of the kind that people are suggesting. So if we can get that out of the way, the next question is, like, what's realistically happening here? And his MNAV sits around 1, which is, the company is still backed by a lot of Bitcoin. So strategy just, it depends on the price action of Bitcoin, but it's not leading the price action of Bitcoin. It's not determining the price action of Bitcoin. If Bitcoin goes to zero, sure, Stretch goes to zero, strategy goes to zero, fine, that's it, right? So then you have to ask yourself the question, do you believe that Bitcoin is going to zero? If that's the case, like why are you even here? Paying any attention? And honestly, I would just probably prefer to trade Bitcoin to zero instead of strategy or Stretch, because at some point the liquidity is going to be so thin that it's going to be impossible to trade if that's going to happen, right? Bitcoin is going to be much more liquid doing it. So I think it's quite overblown. And I think buying Stretch here is not crazy. If you like, low returns, I would probably prefer owning Bitcoin, but I bought some Stretch just for the sake of it, and just also to prove a point, I guess, that we're gonna keep receipts on some of those people in Bitcoin. So I think we should jump into some tickers. I think a bunch of people suggested that I should look at TRX. Hopefully that's going to make sense. And then we're just going to go through the tickers that we did last week just to update them. So I don't know about Bitcoin, to be honest. I've been saying that 64 here is the key level. It kind of starts to look like a possible rejection. But I do like the odds if we can hold above 64K. To me, if we can gain 64, let's put it here. Let's just put it on the top here, to be a little bit conservative. So 64.5. It would give us this double bottom instead of the idea that this is going to become a rejection. Like that. So if we hold 64 and we can gain, we can gain this area, we can go back into that range, then I do think this is just a giant range, and that at the moment we should be looking at around 71K as a retest for me to be super bullish. And that's kind of the same structure as we're seeing here. We have the level here, and if we go back to 74K, it's the same level here, right? So high time frame, if 74K can be reclaimed, that's super bullish. For now, I would say if we can hold 64, we would probably trade back into 71, and that's where I would close out the trade. If it's weak, if the market is weak, it's not even going to go back to 74, right? It's not going to close the inefficiency that it left behind here. It's probably just going to stop behind and leave this gap here later to be refilled. But for now, I'm not I'm not super pessimistic yet on the chances of that happening. Then ETH, good reaction of the entry we discussed last week, down at 260 to 61, and I would just hold this and keep the same levels that we discussed last week. ETH BTC is then probably going to trade into, half of the range, which is around 0.03. That would be my first target, where it's also going to become a confirmed breakout of the wedge. So it probably should be able to go to the next fib level at 0.382. We could even draw the retracement here and say that it should at least be able to go back to the 0.5, which is at 0.3427. Then for ETHUSDT, it's kind of the same as Bitcoin, but it looks a little bit better because ETH BTC is doing quite well. So as long as we hold the level here, we should be able to backfill the full dump. If ETH BTC is stronger, which the chart suggests that it is, the 2000 level is still on the table. So for now, I'm holding this. No reason to kind of change the plan here. I would probably be out if we lose the daily level here. That looks bad, right? So for now, I think this guy's here. Then Zcash, we talked about how big a time frame. My expectation is that this is a kind of like what Bitcoin did during the COVID crash. So essentially, we said this looks like the 2018 bear market, and this looks like the echo bubble, and this looks like the COVID crash. But since the COVID crash, took a lot longer to happen, there was a lot more price action back then before we came to 3-4K again. I do think this needs sideways for sure, and then the question is sideways upwards or sideways downwards. And for now, I do think this, what we've seen since last week is kind of confirming that it's going to bleed with a few bounces in between. So the green path here would be something I would be entertaining. In broader picture, if you want to trade that, that's fine. I'm probably not going to trade it until I see some decisive price action to the upside. But where I do trade it is once it wants to come down here and sweep the low of the low that we had on the 15th of June, right? So if we can get down here, maybe it's gonna come down here, but that's where I would start filling a position again, like slowly start to build it. And if we see the reaction and we start seeing the downtrend, the local downtrend being broken to the upside, then I'll probably jump in and add a lot of risk to this one. And then unfortunately, Zcash BTC doesn't look too great right now. It looks like it wants to come down as well. So that kind of aligns with the USDT chart. And the reason why I'm saying this, if you take a look at the Itchy, it's it's crossed below the price and it's crossing these lines here. So it's probably going to come back into the cloud. I don't think the cloud is going to be the perfect support here. So it's probably going to come down into the 0.06 region, at least, here. And then maybe it's even going to come below the cloud a little bit. So that looks kind of similar to the USDT chart, where this kind of becomes the region to be interested in getting exposure again. So we're just going to let that one cook a little bit. Unfortunately, Monero is kind of a little bit less happy. I wanted to have the entry at 340. I did, and then it came back down below. It's not retesting it. So I'm kind of, I still hold the position because the general idea is that we're gonna, you know, that this low has to hold, and that this is just some kind of reaccumulation that's gonna drive us into 500 and eventually like 680, to kind of create this barred, so down, sideways, up. But it's not, it's not the most comfortable trade right now, especially since all the other coins are not really doing really well. So we're gonna just keep a look on that. I'm out if we dump below 280, but other than that, I do think that I want to hold this for much higher. And then I don't know about hype. Hype still looks good. Um, we talked about that last week, where you know this weekly retest was quite nice. Let's see. So I don't know if we do get a retest simply of the weekly level, that would be where I'm interested. So this lines up with the weekly candle here and the weekly high of September 15th, 2025. And on the daily, we don't really have a lot of structure here to support that, but if price does retest here, then I'd be a buyer. I missed the entry here because I wanted to have 52, and then we hit 53. So that's kind of like, it sucks. And whenever it's not that clean and that clear to me how to enter a trade, I become hesitant, and I don't want to chase it, but I do think it's gonna perform really well over the long term. Um, like high time frame, this just looks really awesome, right? Like you have this uptrend correction, then it goes higher, it retests it. It's definitely in a good place. And then if you draw the extension from that first move that we had from $8 to 60, that gives us a price target of at least $100. So yeah, that looks good. And I don't think you have to like sweat this one too much. Famous last words. And I do think that in terms of price action, this kind of looks like, so this is definitely impulsive, and then this whole structure is a sideways structure, and this is definitely impulsive again. And I do think that because this is quite sideways as well, that this is a subwave, meaning that this probably can go a little bit higher before a bigger correction, and then there's going to be a final wave. So I do think that generally speaking here, the $100 target is definitely a place to become cautious on the asset, and take the profits out, right? We talked about Solana, but I'm not too interested in it, to be honest. Like I spoke about getting involved, but just not super strong here. Um, I prefer looking at coins that have been doing these kind of things like Near, but even Near is kind of screwing me because I got an entry at 217, and I'm underwater on it, and we're essentially doing the same kind of thing that makes me unhappy about like the price, because the lagging span is kind of piercing the price here, so it needs to revert. It needs to hold the cloud here, and then we can get to our 330 price target. um Not too keen to hold this if this comes below, like just below $2. but for now I'm holding it, and I do think that if we can get this structure here to hold, that we should go to 330. And then everyone's been talking about TRX, and it's been very not everyone has been talking about it, but like friends of mine have been talking about it, and crypto Twitter has been very silent. So when I looked at the chart, I was not surprised to see it just go up and up and up and up. And I don't know like what to make of this chart, to be honest. Like how do you get an entry on something that you don't believe in, can't quantify, has been running high, and then obviously is coming into some kind of high time frame resistance here? Let's see. Extend to the right. Because that's resistance, so it's pretty close. It looks on the lower time frames, it definitely looks parabolic. On the USDT pair, not so much, but still, it. I don't know what to make of it, because I also don't understand why it's going up. Right? Like, is there a narrative to it? Why is there? Usually, when there's a lot of hype on Twitter, that's a sign to get out of it. So it's a good sign that there's no hype on Twitter. But why is there any interest in TRX? It's an Ethereum fork. There's a lot of USDT on it, but I don't understand the purpose. If anyone can explain to me like what's behind that, I would be very interesting. I would be very interested. So on top of that, I don't think that we have a lot left to talk about. I think Venice. Yeah, I mean, clearly Venice is ready for consolidation. It's on the cloud, so that's a place where you would think to be, but to become interested. But I do think this is gonna lose the cloud and drop the cloud and have like a bigger consolidation. So I do think Venice could fill the gap left behind in April and May. So I would be interested if this comes down to anywhere between 10 and 12 to get a position, and then the target of that would be probably where the black line is, which is going to come down. So I would probably say if you can get an entry at around 10, maybe you get an exit at 15. I do think also the AI hype has been big. SpaceX IPO launched. You jumped on the bandwagon of Venice because it serves AI, whatever. So when is the moment you're gonna sell? You're gonna sell as the SpaceX IPO finishes, right? Like there's no lockup here. There's no mechanism that's gonna prevent people from selling it. So it's a good time to get out and do some distribution and do some reaccumulation lower. So probably bearish in the short term and then reaccumulate. And I think the same kind of works here for Tau. I would be very interested in Tau when it kind of breaks its trend line here. But for now, this is just bound by that trend line, and it could theoretically come keep bouncing between that trend line. If we copy this trend line, why not come back down here for like a third sweep? I wouldn't Yeah, I wouldn't be too interested. If price does come up here and it starts breaking out, then it's interesting, right? Then it's super interesting because then it does look like you had a nice impulse, like wave one, wave two, wave three, wave four, five, and then a big bull flag, and then a breakout. That would put us roughly, if we say this is the low and it's gonna start breaking out here, I would say it should be able on the high time frame to at least go to $413. And then if it's really bullish, it should be able to go to like 555 and rate this high here. But just something to keep an eye on, but not something I would be acting on. Bitcoin targets of 45, 50K. I don't think it's gonna happen, mate. I do think I mean, obviously it could happen, but as long as we have this double bottom structure here and we don't lose it, I'm saying it's not gonna happen. I don't want to act on this resistance here. It's a clean retest, but I think people are basing that kind of 40, 30, 50K target on a catalyst that's related to, for example, Saylor. We talked about that at the beginning of this stream, where I said it's kind of ridiculous to compare Saylor with Luna, and I think Saylor has enough runway to cover stretch until Bitcoin price is much higher, and then everyone will have forgotten about whatever is happening. And the other thing is that he could, for example, get a bunch of loans at 5 or 6%, to restructure some of the debt in a way that he takes a haircut, but it takes away all the fear in the market. I don't think he's gonna do that. I think he's gonna just let people have fear. He's gonna come out of the other end, um, it just being a bear market. But I don't, like there's no way they can liquidate him or his Bitcoin positions, and he's gonna take the gamble that he will be able to survive the next 9 months, paying the dividend. He just raised 300 million last week, which is extending his dividend runway. I think he will be able to keep doing that, and eventually people will realize that they made a stupid mistake by shorting Stretch. Like a bunch of people got Stretch on a leveraged deal, right? They borrow money to buy more Stretch to get more dividend, and that entity or those entities definitely have been kind of fucked by now. And maybe Stretch can go much lower. Like if there's any leverage left, we don't really have a way of looking into that, unfortunately. But Stretch going to 50 is not going to change anything for Saylor. So I think this doom propaganda that's being spread on Twitter right now is completely out of line. And I've never seen crypto Twitter call a black swan accurately, right? And now the detectives that didn't see any of the black swans coming that actually did happen, like the FTX, Terra Luna, which, I actually did call out at the time as being a big pile of shit, are now saying that this is going to blow up the entire market. And they're comparing mechanisms of Terra Luna with MicroStrategy, which is completely, it's like apples and pears. Like they're both fruits, but that's it. They have a very different shape and they taste differently. They're both sweet, but they taste differently. So I think there's enough fear in the market right now. And we had a double bottom. Unless something happens in the global market, but we had a war which kind of seems to be, getting resolved. And we're still being super fearful at a low that's being respected on a like people forget this chart, but honestly, like Bitcoin doesn't generally go below previous all-time highs by much, right? So this entire region, if we, for example, watch it on a monthly, that's where you need support. Generally expect support. Like we could go to the Bitstamp chart to get all the history, but like 2022 was the first time that we actually significantly went below the previous all-time high, and that was on the biggest, the biggest protocols and the biggest exchanges in crypto exploding, billions and billions and billions of money of people gone. And right now we have the kind of same narrative, but it's not happening, right? It cannot be enforced in the market, and perhaps there's some leverage being shaken out, as you can see on Stretch, but it's in the same kind of position. Why would it be different? And then people say, yeah, well, it's different because the fractal back then needs to be followed. Let's see, where the fuck is this? The bar pattern here. Yeah, everyone says, you know, this needs to be followed. And because it needs to be followed, it needs another leg lower. Uh, uh, like like I don't know, where is the leg lower then? Like, do you say it's going to 30 like that because it needs to follow that kind of pattern? I don't know. Um, for me, if you hold the month right here, it's super bullish. Like, it's basically the reclaim of this low in June 2022, and then you're probably gonna, it doesn't mean that we're gonna get like a crazy super high cycle, but it's gonna bounce and at least come back into the highs like around 108 in by next year. Maybe it's gonna do like a longer sideways cycle, but I don't know why we I just don't know, like, why we would go to 30K. It would be a complete loss of bullish long-term structure, because you go below here, you go back into the range, you kind of, the entire uptrend would be violated of Bitcoin, which is entirely possible, but I don't know why I would still be here. It just shouldn't happen. If it happens, I don't know what's next for Bitcoin. It's crazy hot here. The aircon is not working. Starlink is not working. It's like I need to fix that shit. Yeah, if I would grow a smaller portfolio right now, I would probably, first of all, stay away from leverage. And I would be focused on anything that touches AI, that's crypto. So I would do research and find projects that are in seed phase, that do things crypto related to AI, that could propel AI out of its governance issues. And for example, Mythos was released, and you get this point where the government says, okay, well, we're going to apply expert controls because this is technology that's of military grade that we cannot let other people have. We need ways to do this, to govern this in a way that's fast and accurate, where we can really measure the outcomes without a single centralized board having the controls, right? So we should have ways to deploy AI to infrastructure that we can govern and manage. So anything that touches that, for example, that makes AI smarter, better controlled, or creates freedom to AI where we can actually keep getting access to open source protocols, but at the same time are able to prevent these protocols from doing things that we as a as humanity don't want them to happen. So tools that improve the way that AI is, how the guardrails of AI work without a single centralized entity actually deciding what to do. I would start looking for projects like that and try to get an allocation on them. And then anything AI related that's already released, get a small, make a small bucket of assets like near some privacy coins. Venice is interesting, like I said. Tau is interesting. Those are things that should be outperforming Bitcoin, and I wouldn't buy them on leverage. I would just get a bucket of these and kind of create like a top 10 or top 20 or top 30 and see what's coming into, for example, the top 10, which came from the top, from the the number 30 spot. If it came from the number 30 spot, and it gets into the into the top 10, it's probably gonna get into the top 5, and create a bucket with weights like an index basically, and figure out a way how to allocate in that, which is going to give you some upside, if that makes sense. And I mean, you can trade all these stocks as well, right? AI related stocks on I think there's a bunch of on KuCoin as well. Um, yeah, I think the best thing to do, like in a bigger picture, that's always performed. If you look at how most crypto legends in their cycle became big, they bought spot of the most promising projects of the next cycle. So it's about figuring out what the meta is going to be, what's the narrative going to be, what's going to be interesting, and then figure out where the capital allocation is happening. And there's always going to be the next 100x. Also in crypto, even if crypto looks kind of dead right now because AI has been the thing, the show. Um, pretty sh- pretty sure AI is gonna be the show for the next 2-3 years until global markets top in like 20, maybe next year, maybe in 2028. If that's the case, you wanna align yourself with crypto related protocols that actually improve that whole proposition of AI. That's what I would bet on right now. Like, and then the other thing is that the world's becoming super draconian. Governments are limiting freedom, and they're being a bunch of assholes essentially. So anything that gives you power to, you know, protect your privacy, so privacy coins, and then anything that AI itself can use, right? So any platform or any protocol that's very likely to be used by AI or users who use AI, there should be a lot of upside there too. Like, if an AI can get their hands on decentralized payment methods and there's a market for it, and that AI is going to get big, who knows? Um, and if that AI is autonomous enough to decide whether it's going to use a privacy coin or not, who knows? I think that's it for today, guys. It's been 52 minutes, maybe a little bit less because of all the little troubles. I want to, one more time focus on our sponsor, KuCoin, and just check out the link in the description below. Just go there, sign up, do the KYC, see if you like it, and if not, let me know. If you like it, let me know. If you have any issues signing up, let me know. If you have any questions, again, let me know, and I will see you later. Ciao.